Let me tell you a story. It's about the remote past and history that has been nearly forgotten, buried under time. We think that our history is quite short. And before the Sumerians, we were cavemen and women, very primitive, lost to the wilderness. But what if I told you that humankind is hundreds of thousands of years old, and that who we are today, with our advanced, accelerating technology, is nowhere close to the advancements that we experienced in the remote past? There's so much wonder. It is complex, multidimensional, and extraordinary. Our remote past is more galactic than terrestrial. Though we are earthbound, our DNA is not. Our DNA is interstellar. What if I told you that star beings used to reside on this planet, and that the indigenous ones who speak of the star beings, speak of the night sky, other planetary systems, are not simply stories to feed our delight, to feed our wonder. There are many galactic interferences that have come and go on this planet. Even now, we can't see them, but we know something is being activated in our DNA, and it has to do with some kind of galactic interference. That interference can be positive for the giving, and that interference can be negative for the taking. We've experienced both as humankind, but for some reason human beings have been a prevailing force. We are the chosen ones. We have been chosen by the Galactic Confederation to be the space holders for the Earth's consciousness. And that's why we tend to always survive the worst of the ages and eras, the floods, the ice ages, volcanic eruptions. We seem to survive. We may go extinct temporarily, but some reason we fit this planet quite well as human beings. But we're not the only beings. We think of the animals, we think of the plants as their own universe, their own creation, special, unique to their own. And it just seems Earth is a cornucopia of species. So much wonder on this planet. So many species. So much energy, dimensionally. And we have not even begun to fully capture the fullness of our potential and the fullness of our history and our future. In the remote past, we think of the cradle of life in Sumeria, the Middle East. And that's what the high school textbook says. And we think of Sumerian kings to be 40,000 years old, and the first kings before the human kings. and that these kings were quite giants. And they had a sophisticated knowledge of the stars. They were cosmic astronauts, understanding of astrology, understanding of all kinds of studies, biology, geology. They were quite sophisticated, these kings, these beings that humans call the Anunnaki. Very tall, robust, very smart, sophisticated, quite intelligent, and intergalactic. And they didn't just go to Sumeria. They went to other places. They went to Peru. And cuneiform gives evidence to their interference with Peruvian history. But the Middle East, as we all know, is like a hub of energy. Even today, you can feel the energy. There's so much creative energy that was born from the Middle East. But at the same time, there's so much destructive energy. I guess as high as you go is as low as you go in the polarization theory. Middle East is birth of song and dance and story and rhythm and soul and art and craftsmanship. When we think of from India all the way to parts of Asia, so much wonder, so much creative expression of the life force. We think of the Middle East as the life force, the navel point of the earth. And we think of Europe as the heart, because that's where all the languages seem to come together and begin to come into a space of celebration. But I want to go deeper. Yes, we know of the Anunnaki, the great giants. When we think of the story, it's written all across the walls, or the walls that are still left in the Middle East. The walls that are not being kept hidden or destroyed. Gives evidence to Anunnaki being these beings from a planet called Nibiru. Supposedly is a planet within our solar system, but has a very wide-reaching orbit that comes close to us every 3,600 years or so. And these Anunnaki beings, these giants, they use a lot of resources. And their planet Nibiru is not the only planet. They've been to other planets, and they've gathered a lot of resources, a lot of energy. The masters of energy. But they use a lot of it. And I suppose that's why they needed energy from Earth, because Earth is quite an energizing place. There's a lot of energy here. A lot of energy. I think that's why so many beings are drawn to this planet, because of the amount of energy that Earth emits throughout the cosmos. And I guess they engineered their version of human, as the story goes. They engineered a version of human that would basically be a slave. And that we would do their work. We would give them resources. We would spend a lot of time providing for them. And they would spend a lot of time taking from this planet. Not necessarily replenishing, but just taking resources, because they needed the energy, because they somehow require a lot of energy. I mean, who wouldn't? If you are traveling intergalactically, you need a lot of energy. We barely have energy to go to Mars, let alone go out of the system. Our fossil fuel, the dead energy we use, is nowhere near enough to become a renewable, sustainable, and advanced technology planet. We haven't even gotten to phase 1 of our civilization, where we have mastered the ecosystem of Earth, where we have come into a sustainable and stable energy system on Earth. We're still using dead things. But Anunnaki, they have a grander view of energy. They have many more experiences than we do, much older. So they've been around the block a couple times when I guess it comes to their own civilization, the rise and fall. But they're survivors. They have always been survivors. So the story goes, we gave them resources such as gold. Gold being very, very high energy. I guess that's why we all want it today. It's very high energy. We can use gold to become interstellar, or we can travel interdimensionally with that kind of technology of gold. But then humans broke away. Eve ate the forbidden fruit, which is knowledge, and human began to want to become sovereign, want to become its own life, to create its own civilization, to have its own independent, collective group. And the story goes like that, for the Middle East at least. But that's only one story. That's only one geographic region. We can talk about the New Mu beings of North America, South America, of all places around this planet, Australia, New Zealand, that have been these dolphin-like beings that have come to share with us, like the Mu civilization. We think of them as the Lumerians. Similar to the Mu civilization, these New Mu beings offered us understanding of consciousness. Consciousness as a renewable energy. Consciousness being abundant, consciousness being infinite. Consciousness never is depleting anything. And that comes from a very different stream of thought. Comes from a lighter stream of thought, less dense, less authoritative and aggressive on the environment. But what about the reptilians? Supposedly the reptilians existed. We think of Egypt, the Middle East. That was the hub, not only for intergalactic trading, but supposedly when the planet became very hot, as it becomes hot and then it becomes cold, as we know, things change. Nothing is ever the same. The Ice Age brings in great cold, and then the Ice Age after that brings in great warmth. And these reptilians, they exist in warmth, just like any kind of serpent. And that's what the reptilians were, these serpent-like creatures. And depicting them, as our ancients have done on stone, they're always seen as these serpent creatures. And the story of them goes like this. Long ago, long before the Anunnaki, there was these draconian beings from the Draco system. You can see in this night sky near the Lyran system constellation. And these Draco beings are quite intelligent. They also have a reptilian serpent-like appearance, and they came and they wanted to create a being on this planet Earth. They created dinosaurs, helped engineer that. but they wanted to create something more supposedly spiritually and emotionally inclined, not just when we think of reptilian as in fight or flight, that kind of more aggressive type of species, like the dinosaurs, especially the carnivores. They wanted to create a more emotionally, spiritually inclined being that could access interdimensional time and space. Of course, the dinosaurs could not. They didn't possess that kind of emotional and spiritual evolution to do that. So the Draconians engineered this serpent-like creature, because at the time, that was the only kind of species that, the reptile, that was strong enough to survive in such harsh environment, just like the dinosaurs. That reptile species was able to survive, to be survivors, so that when the Draconians left and went to their other worlds, they could be assured that the reptilians would still be alive when they would return. And these Draconians, just like any kind of being, there's good and bad. There's positive, there's negative. No one's ever the same to each other. And Draconians, like Anunnaki, or I guess any sort of advanced being, is hunting for energy. And sometimes that is for the giving and the taking. Sometimes it's hunting for energy to take because it can provide you more technology improvements, or it's for the giving, such as giving technology, as there has been great ascended masters who have given technology in the form of scientific discovery, but also in the form of consciousness, which is a more renewable method of technology. It's more full of lightness and not so dense and not so aggressive on time and space. But these Draconians were more dense. They were not like the Mu civilization. They were not like the New Mu beings. They were denser. I mean, reptiles are quite denser. As you can see, crocodiles, alligators, they're not very much lightness. There's a quite aggression in them, a great aggression in them. So these reptilians were somewhat like Draconians, but they were engineered differently. They were engineered to have more emotional and spiritual inclination. Because the Draconians, that's something that they did not possess. They had it in them, as I imagine all species do, but just like crocodiles and alligators compared to mammals, such as dolphins and whales, you can see a quite difference. Dolphins and whales have such a lighter energy. They have more emotional and spiritual sense of sunshine and group and collective awareness and feelings and grieving and sharing. And alligators and crocodiles, quite different. They're not the same. Just like snakes. They're survivors, yes, but there's something else that's missing. And that's like the Draconians. They knew how to survive. Very brilliant, very sophisticated, very intelligent, just like any kind of crocodile or snake. They're very smart. But there's not emotional and spiritual inclination. There's a atrophied or even absent, dormant, or not at all emotional and spiritual intelligence. So all across this planet, you'll see these serpent-like depictions of beings. Or they'll look like dragons or something like that. And that has to do with these dragon-serpent interference that came very long ago, before we think of ancient Egypt and the pre-dynastic Egyptians. And that the reptilians, they were survivors. But before the division happened, the reptilians, they were in support of the human. And the human supposedly was like a miracle child. It came together with the support of many intergalactic beings. And human was created like a prayer, like a miracle. It wasn't just something to engineer to survive. It was like a group effort in the creating of the human. The Syrians, the Lyrans, the Pleiadians, all these different beings, even reptilians, the Ryans, all kind of came together within the Galactic Confederation to take part in this sort of ceremony of birthing of the human. And then there was this birth of the human, like a miracle child. It came in like a prayer. It came in like an experiment that went very well. And the experiment called human was very much a perfect fit for the earth. We were survivors, but we were mammals, and we had even a greater emotional and spiritual capacity than the reptilians. So the reptilians were very much like rulers, leaders. They knew this earth very well in very ancient times, even before the humans. And as different sort of galactic beings came to Earth, we think of the Mu beings and the Atlantean beings, the New Mu beings, such as these dolphin-like beings that we see today within the oceans. There seems to be more dolphins in our oceans than there are human beings on land. Those are like New Mu beings. There's a lot of them even here today. And they have such a lightness transmission, such a divine, beautiful transmission. It's very warm for the heart. It makes you feel joy and compassion and bliss. A lot of times when we think reptilians, we think of not so much that. We think of control. We think of authoritative issues. So the reptilians, they had such a leadership. They had such a ownership of this earth. Like they believed they owned the earth, that they were the heirs to this earth. And they had a lot of systems. They were quite organizers, very, very much organizers. And they understood about creation and how to create civilization, as they learned from the Draconians. But the Draconians had they were very sophisticated at order, organization, had a diplomacy, but they were also very aggressive, very controlling. And the reptilians kind of took after that. And they created a system, their own, within the reptilians, but then also, because humans were here, it also affected humans. But there wasn't that many humans at this time. There was a lot more reptilians than humans, because humans were just kind of finding their way. They were more indigenous than today. Humans that have cars and computers and are in metropolitan areas and have leadership and have these genius quality in the way of technology and can go on planes, and these were indigenous humans, but they were very sophisticated spiritually. They were indigenous, yet they were very smart. They understood a lot of things. And that's the difference, is humans, they learn very quickly. Reptilians, it took them a gradual process. They had to evolve for a long time to really understand creation. But humans, we were learning very quickly. We learn very, very quickly. We can even surpass reptilians very quickly when we're focused and concentrated. So I guess reptilians saw us as a rivalry, just like in the medieval period. Saw us as like a force that could overthrow them, that could overpower them. And that's the one thing that serpent-like DNA does not like, to be overpowered. when you're working and functioning more from that aggressive part of your DNA, you're all about power. You're programming your brain to be about power. Power, power, power. Right? We think of the serpent as a symbol of power, even in all kinds of spiritual scripture. The serpent is like power, knowledge, wealth, fertility, and the power over fertility, the power over civilization. So human beings were not programmed in that way. We were programmed more in the neocortex. We had more about creative pursuits. We were more about inner power, personal power, power of consciousness, not so much an aggressive, like dolphins. We are more tribal, collective. We are more about experiencing of emotional and spiritual fulfillment rather than just survival in the way of taking and power, the power of survival. We were more about emotional and spiritual pursuits, fulfillment in those areas. Yes, we knew about survival, but we were more ritualistic, ceremonious when it came to survival. We were more like indigenous. We saw a great spirit in all things, in nature, the sacred river, the ocean. It all would speak to us in such a reverent, respectful way. It wasn't just power for the taking. It was something of emotional and spiritual connection that was more heartfelt, more about giving, more about companionship, more about co-creation than just aggression and power and taking to survive. So the reptilians admired humans in this way, but also maybe were jealous because humans were very advanced emotionally, spiritually. But a lot of those advancements did come from the support of the Galactic Confederation, the Pleiadians, the Sirians, the Lyrans, all these different beings that came to Earth that were masterful in their own planetary system. And the reptilians were masterful over a long period of time, but did not have, there's something missing. They didn't have what the Pleiadians and the Lyran beings had. They didn't have an emotional and spiritual connection to the great spirit of all things. But over time, they began to develop that emotional and spiritual intelligence through a lot of focus and concentration. And they became very emotionally intelligent. They knew how to switch it on and off pretty organically, but also quite controlled. They weren't like flow, let it flow. They were more about what can they take, what can they do to better themselves. They were more proactive than just letting it flow and being. As the Mu civilization, as the new Mu beings, and as many other civilizations of galactic beings who've come to this earth. They were more about flow, being with your emotions and your spirituality, letting things be the law of the jungle rather than the law of systematic oppression, which was a method of creating a sort of structure, but it was very authoritative. And that's what the Draconians have, a very authoritative system that really is not a flow state. It's kind of anti-flow. So the reptilians, they had a leadership for a very long time. This is before pre-dynastic Egypt, before any sort of history we think of humans. Humans at this time probably were like cavemen and cavewomen, indigenous, yet growing quite rapidly in their emotional and spiritual connection because they were tribal. We do best when we're tribal. We don't do best alone. We grow leaps and bounds when we are more like a pack of wolves. We become very sophisticated in that way, emotionally and spiritually. And reptilians, they had the major cities. especially in the Middle East. They were like these kings, these priests. They were creating a very system that was authoritative, that was based on power. And a lot of humans started to mimic that. And humans began to fall into that system. We can call it the Matrix. The Anunnaki didn't create that Matrix. The Anunnaki came for a particular purpose, just to gather resources. The Matrix was created more through a reptilian interference that was more long-standing and more of a permanent kind of basis on this planet. And Anunnaki, of course, had an authoritative system within their own sort of governing of their civilization, as they believed in elites and elite groups, and they believed in the pure bloods, and they believed there are those who are better than others. They believed in that kind of separation, self-preserving. And self-preserving was something humans in our indigenous connection, we didn't really fit into that. But we started to mimic that. We started to drink from the Kool-Aid, and it started to affect us. We started to become more power-seeking because that's what was around us, especially in the Middle East. With Anunnaki and the reptilians, there was so much in this power. They were also fighting each other in their own groups, that we kind of mirrored that. We took on that karma, and we sort of manifested that for our own species. You know, just like son takes after father. And we were like the sons and daughters of these beings, supposedly, but it wasn't real. They were false gods. We didn't come from them. We didn't come from the Anunnaki or the reptilians. We came from a higher power that went far beyond them. We came from the Galactic Confederation. And the group of intergalactic beings who came together from higher vibrational spaces of time that came through prayer to seed us as human beings. They created us, not through engineering in a way of control and force and mutation and manipulation, but they created us through prayer, through miracle, through consciousness, through intention, not through mutation or manipulation. That's the difference. Of course, there were humans that were created in the Anunnaki, but those were not the only humans. Those were a different type of humans. As there were different types of civilizations of humans on this earth. They weren't just all the same. But these humans, the indigenous ones, they were created from the prayer, the miracle, consciousness, higher dimensions. This other group of humans were created from engineering, mutation, manipulation. It was more artificial, it was more controlled. It wasn't natural, it wasn't naturally occurring. It was very controlled. But that group broke free. And for a time, the Anunnaki, of course, they left. Some of them stayed, a lot have left, because they no longer could stay on Earth, as the Galactic Confederation made it very clear that Anunnakis had to leave. They could no longer take the resources from Earth, because they needed to leave to allow the Earth to grow naturally to its own process. And the Anunnaki was creating an interference that was actually preventing the Earth and particularly human beings from growing naturally. Because the whole point of creating humans was to see emotional and spiritual growth that was happening naturally, not through Anunnaki interfering and controlling how that's going to happen. So they had to leave to let the humans do what they naturally need to do to grow and to evolve. But reptilians, they came here. They were from here. They were a part of this earth very deeply, more so than the humans. And they felt they are the heirs. They felt that they were the sole heirs, that they were the rulers, that they were the leaders, that they were more important than the humans. Again, self-preserving. It's about power. It's about survival. and they felt quite overwhelmed by the human emotional and spiritual growth. And they wanted to basically dumb down human beings, put them in a lower ranking, even though human beings were far surpassing them in emotional and spiritual with the help of the matriarchal reptilian age that happened, where the matriarchal reptilian age basically gave free knowledge to human beings, free knowledge. And it was focused on the women, helping the women to become the leaders, to become the shamans, the teachers, the spiritual guides. As the matriarchal reptilian period of time was very emotionally and spiritually fulfilled, very fulfilling. But then, of course, giving free anything is not really acceptable in a very authoritative mindset. So there became rivalry going on between matriarchal and patriarchal sort of division that was happening within the reptilian brain that would manifest within a great reptilian fighting within the reptilian group that was going on, fighting over humans, basically. Some wanted humans to be basically indigenous and didn't want them to really grow, but they were already growing spiritually, emotionally. Humans understood everything. They may not have had the technology, but they had a spiritual technology that was far beyond the reptilians' physical, mechanical technology. And there were others who believed humans should have the right to grow and to flourish and to blossom and bloom because that is their divine right. So there became that kind of argument that would go on for a long time, and that would manifest as some humans were being allowed to be free and to grow and evolve, and others were being heavily suppressed and dumbed down so that humans could never ever overthrow the reptilians, because they knew it would happen eventually, especially as humans became more populated and had a civilization that was beyond just tribal, as they became more metropolitan. So the reptilians, they were forced to go underground. I mean, they went underground during the ice ages of this planet because they don't like the cold. But there was something that happened to this earth that they couldn't survive. Like, they couldn't sustain themselves, but humans could. They realized that human beings, though we seem more fragile than them, we actually have a strength that they don't necessarily have. And it's an emotional and spiritual type. It didn't appear that humans would be survivors because we seem to be much fragile, even weak compared to the reptilians who are more aggressive. They control the environment. But they had to go underground. They're there now. There's maybe about like 200, 400,000 maybe. Much lower number compared to us, but we're much lower number compared to the dolphins. And humans were decided to become the heirs of this earth, the chosen ones, because humans, we were all inclusive. We were more giving to the environment, the ecosystem. We understood about the circle of life, respecting of the animals and plants. We had more respect for nature. I mean, the reptilians did as well, especially in the matriarchal sort of leadership. But it was chosen by the Galactic Confederation for humans to continue on in their evolution. The reptilians were creating too much interference. They were creating too much blockages for humans. So when the humans began to grow spiritually and emotionally in ways of becoming galactic, which humans have become galactic, the reptilians, they could not understand, they could not reach those levels. They had technology, yes, but they couldn't reach those levels. So they were very bound because they were more low vibrational. And it had to do with the transmutation that they didn't know how to do, or they didn't do, or they didn't give enough attention to that they needed to basically transmute their bodies, become lighter. And when they would become lighter, they would have a more fuller consciousness, and they would be able to become transdimensional and intergalactic. As humans were able to have intergalactic, interdimensional experiences, Pleiades, the Lyran, the Sirians, and humans were possessing a strength in their spiritual leadership. And they didn't need technology to do that. They didn't need devices to do that. They were able to do it just with their own mind. And that was something reptilians, they needed devices, they needed a technology, something mechanical, something artificial to boost themselves, to get that kind of secretion of the pituitary gland or pineal gland, to have that sort of shamanistic view of time and space. But humans, we were becoming very masterful in the height of our civilization. And we did it all more indigenous. It wasn't like through advanced technology. Though we had pyramids in this time, especially with the Mu civilization and Atlantean, but it was all more through consciousness awareness rather than devices that we were codependent to. We did it through our mind, basically. The reptilians, they had a very impactful mind, but humans, I suppose reptilians were envious of us because we didn't just have power of control. We had a different power. We had a power of will. And we learned that from reptilian elders. They taught us about this kind of, they taught us about survival, but they also taught us about creation. That's why we think of the serpent as the story of creation. And these reptilians, these elders that taught the great leaders of this planet in our remote past that would become great kings and queens of the human civilizations, and the bloodlines that would go into become very powerful bloodlines on this planet of sovereignty and dignity. The elders that taught this to humans, a lot of them were ridiculed, and a lot of them were even banded, outcasted, a lot of them even destroyed. Because once you understand creation, that accelerated humans' growth. And when you're trying to prevent growth, you do not tell the story of creation. You do not give knowledge. So we think of Eve as the serpent, tempted by the serpent, as Eve is learning from the serpent. She eats the apple, which is eating the fruit of knowledge. And in doing so, her future generations are accelerated, meaning they become out of primitive ways and they move into more of higher ways. And that temptation really was about Adam being tempted by power and control. And that would manifest through Adam's sons. As we see Adam's sons, the rivalry. One basically took power over the other through jealousy, through greed, through self-preserving, and then that would manifest as a patriarchal line of basically doing whatever you want to whoever for power and control. So it was really Eve eating that fruit triggered huge wave of accelerated growth for humankind, but that was both positive and negative, as we had to learn lessons because we had interference in us. We have drank the Kool-Aid. We drank the Kool-Aid, all of us collectively, from the reptilians, Anunnaki in many ways, especially in our leadership. And we began to mimic that kind of aggressive power, authoritative. And we needed to learn lessons about that. We needed to learn about karma. What you do to another is what you do to yourself. Because a lot of our rules were very much karmic, meaning putting us in this pain, this suffering in karma, making us denser, eye for an eye. If you steal something, you get your arm cut off. It was all this suffering and pain, that karmic density that would make us more dense as humans and keep us away from the light of our freedom, both emotionally and spiritually. It made us very aggressive in a way that actually wasn't helpful, and it wasn't natural to who we truly are as humans. We were mimicking something that wasn't really for us to mimic. But of course, we became about power. But Eve, there was a matriarchal group of on this planet, very powerful women. The women of this planet became the space holders for Eve, the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Creation, the Garden of Spiritual Wisdom that was preserved, kept hidden, such as Black Madonna, Mary Magdalene, all these kinds of saints and warrior women. They were preserving the sacred wisdom of the emotional and spiritual technology consciousness. And of course, it was opposing. It was kind of, it was polarized when it came to the patriarchal, which is more reptilian power control. It was not about consciousness. It was more about technology. And the women became very powerful. And this was when the human civilization broke through. They broke through because of the women, because of the matriarchs of this planet, the matriarchs of the elite groups. They became very powerful, and they were able to break through for all of human beings that were wanting to break through of a system that was very oppressive, that was creating a lot of separation, self-preserving, and creating a lot of low vibration, such as suffering and the karmic. That was this karmic sort of structure that was actually keeping people dropping low, keeping people from evolving. It was keeping people stuck. And the matriarchs understood that people were stuck. They were very stuck. And they were the ideas. They were the sharers, the givers, that helped humanity to break free of something that was very, very destructive, very stuck times, very dark times, very stuck. And create more balance, as the women represent balance and harmony. But of course, the opposition came for that as well, and that became the total annihilation of the matriarch. But that never really truly happened. I mean, we live in a patriarchal society that pretty much has suppressed and oppressed the women of the planet, the matriarchs, taking away their power, derobing them, humiliating them, calling them witches, and burning them alive just for the sake of keeping people from the law of the jungle, which is more natural than systematic control that has nothing to do with emotional and spiritual growth. It's just aggression, it's fear, survival. But it's fear-based. It's not survival as an infinite abundance, such as consciousness. It's survival as in density, matter, low vibration. Density and matter is very low. Consciousness is very high. When you think of survival through consciousness, you're more abundant. When you think consciousness through matter and through density, you're very low. It's more limited. It's more restrictive. So the reptilians, there was this whole matriarchal rise, especially when the Hebrews came. So all these galactic beings that came, there was the Martians that also became the Atlanteans. And those Martians were they were from a different time and space, much older than the Earth, as Mars was the first planet to have life. Earth was second. Mars is the bigger sister. But Mars couldn't sustain itself because Martians were takers. Like the Anunnaki, they chose a path to take from the environment, to take resources, and of course, that leads a lot of times to You can't take without replenishing. Sometimes it can destroy a planet or put it into what I call the freeze, where it can no longer give. I mean, Earth, Mars, very abundant, but there comes a point where if you're going to not be cooperative to the ecosystem, and you're going to constantly go against the natural laws of the ecosystem, you're going to go against the law of the jungle, the planet will do something. It will kick you out. And I guess it kicked the Martians out by that planet, Mars, going into the freeze, meaning it became very cold. Then it became very hot in ways of extreme, in ways that basically took that planet and put it into where it is today, this dead planet. But it's not really dead. It's sleeping, it's dormant. It's waiting for us to terraform it, which Mars already knows that we will terraform it someday. It's just a matter of time. So the Martians came, the Atlanteans and the Mu civilization, they came from the Lyra system. The Mu civilization was one of the most helpful for human beings because they shared wisdom that was very liberating. It was not authoritative. It was very, think of it like Taoism or forest bathing. When we think of Asia, in the wisdom of Asia, when there's tea ceremony, there's Qigong, there's Tai Chi, there is a lot about being one with the elements, being one with nature. That's what the new Mu civilization was, total opposite from the Martians, who are self-preserving and about taking resources and about really technology and really not so much about emotional and spiritual evolution. Mus were like the Asians in Asia. Be one with nature, right? Be one with the elements. Be one with the stones. Be one with your ancestors. The great spirit of the earth, like Buddhism, very much. Understanding of all things. All things can reach enlightenment. It was about how to break free from karma, not continue to be in suffering stuck. It was a pathway to free people. It's a pathway of the soul. It was accepted more so globally because we were very indigenous. We were more indigenous than metropolitan. We became that through the Greeks, the Romans. That was also created by the Atlanteans, who became very diplomatic and not so much indigenous. They actually did not really understand the Mu's free spirit about one with nature and their technology being consciousness. They didn't really understand that. Consciousness such as Qigong and Tai Chi, mastering the energy, the aura, the chakras. So the Atlanteans came, the Hebrews came as well. The Hebrew, they came from David's star. That's a very special star. It's ascended master symbol. And the Hebrews were known as the ascended masters, such as Jesus and Jesus's disciples. They were all ascended masters. And the Hebrews, they came from the David star. And they had their own language, they had their own philosophy, they had their own wisdom that they've gathered from their own planet, and they came, and that also helped influence humanity. Because the Hebrews, they were ascended masters. They provided in the Middle East, in all across Europe, even Asia, they provided teachings on, like Jesus, teachings of compassion, teachings of connection, freedom, teachings of independence, dignity. They taught morals, they taught ethics, they taught virtues. The Hebrews were very moral. They had a lot of morality, they had a lot of ethic code. Very different from the Hannibal eye for an eye code. They were not about aggression. They were not about punish and award. They were not about power taking from others. They were not about those power games. They believed that was not a good decision to make because they understood karma, cause and effect. They understood if they chose that power game, that would lead to a future where basically human beings would find themselves stuck in their karma and no way out of it. So they brought in teachings of how to get out of these karmas, of this suffering and this pain and this hurting of the self and other for self-preserving and survival. And the Hebrews, which we know today as the Jewish, they were like their own kind of species of human. They were very private. That's why there's not documentation in the ancient remote past of them. They were very private, they were very secluded. They did their own thing, they lived more tribal, they didn't really interact too much. They were more observers and watchers. But their teachings grew across the globe, the planet, because their teachings were very valuable, and it taught a lot about morals and ethics, and that would become a part of the Greek philosophy later on, because the Atlanteans would take a lot of the teachings of morals, ethics, and wisdom from the Hebrews, and they would put it into their diplomacy and to create the republic that we think of as the Romans. But before that, there was these Atlanteans. But of course, the Atlanteans, they fell, as we know in the story of Atlantis. They basically had to leave, where they just transitioned. And that was during another sort of planetary shift, like a catastrophe, where the planet went into like an ice age, or it could have been like a solar flare, something of this nature, something massive. And the reptilians, they were always there. They lived underground, they lived above ground. They were always just kind of waiting to strike. They just had this self-preserving, kind of like this entitlement to Earth. They had this entitlement to Earth, that they are the sole heirs, they are the leaders, right? And they just watch and wait for that time when they can take advantage. Not all of them, but the prevailing one, but became really caught in this belief system. It's almost like a belief system of the kings of the medieval, like I am the heir, I am entitled, and became very dogmatic, became very like rigid, that belief system. And got really hooked into a lot of the reptilians about being the leaders, right? Because then the Atlanteans became leaders, the Mu had civilization leadership. There's all these different sort of civilizations. Hebrew, they all have their own kind of civilization, but the reptilians believed that they should be the all-power one, that they should have the dominant power, not the Atlanteans. So they worked with the Atlanteans, but they also were forced to go underground because they could not really exist with us because of their density. They couldn't exist with us on the earth, on the land, because they were not allowed. Because we, as humans, we were elevating in a way where we were not accepting of them, and they had to go underground. And they've been there for a very long time. And they comfortable living on the ground, just like, any kind of snake. Comfortable in the darkness. They have tunnels, they have cities all across this planet, especially in desert areas. But there's always this power thing. It's always been deep in their brain. It could be their programming, just like we are biologically programmed to take in sunlight because of photosynthesis. That's how we're born. But there's other planets where you're biologically programmed to take in darkness, right? But they were like biologically programmed to be in like this power thing. And a lot of them resolved it, but there was still in them. Like they couldn't resolve that part of their brain, or their genetic sequence was very... So now, the reptilians, like always, they have this plan to rise from from the dead or rise from the earth, from underground, and to take their leadership to be the sole heirs of this planet and to basically decide where Earth will go. And the fact that they see us and they see that we're not being too respectful to the earth as we usually are, with the plastic ocean and the trash yards and just a lot of suffering that we're just not resolving. The reptilians, being these sort of ancient ones, they believe that they should be the leaders because human beings are not taking care of this planet. But their interference in our past, interference now, has a lot to do with where we are now. Because of this power thing, control thing, has set us up to be very self-preserving about survival of the self. So that creates the society that is separated, as we've been really separated from the tribe and from the elders, and we've been very caught up in our taking, right? We become very similar, like the Atlanteans, like the Romans. Basically, we've become very much about taking, very much about taking resources, technology, but we haven't really given enough focus on consciousness, very much like a lot of beings before us. And that's creating a lot of issues, turmoil on this planet, because we're not giving enough focus to consciousness. But at the same time, the reptilians don't want us to have higher consciousness in the 21st century, because through technology they can control us. And the reason they want to control us is because they want to be the leaders. They want to be the power. They want to create their system. I mean, we have the system on this earth that has been influenced by all kinds of different civilizations of galactic beings, Atlanteans, Mu, the Hebrew, the Martian, the Anunnaki, there's been the Orion, the Arcturians. There's so much interference and influence. And we have the system today. It's basically just, it's been more so decided by the Atlanteans, the Romans we think of, that went all the way from Europe all the way to Asia, basically all the way across the land of Europe to Asia, from Russia all the way down to South Africa, into India, into Australia, basically. And we are now deciding consciousness, or we are needing to decide consciousness as the matriarchs, which are the Hebrew women, the great spiritual leaders, which happen to be these Hebrew women in the ancient past, the saviors, those who led us to the promised lands, even Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, Jesus. Within all kinds of different religions, there's always been these matriarchs, these Hebrews, that were there in their privacy, creating wonder for this planet, miracles. They were miracle workers. They didn't use technology, they didn't use aggression, they didn't use force. They used this mercy, this grace, and they saved humanity time and time again in the ancient past. They saved humanity from immorally bankrupt society. The Great Flood, all these different catastrophes that basically triggered humans into the Stone Age, or into out of a metropolitan type of civilization into basically tribal living again. These matriarchs have saved humans from that aggression, from that part of them, like the reptilian brain, like reptilians, that is so self-preserving that you would kill someone else to preserve yourself. In a way, and there were times on this earth that became so dangerous to live, as we know this. And it's still happening now. But these matriarchs, they were like the 12 zodiac. They brought wisdom. They brought pure wisdom. And some of them were men, some of them were women, but it was this feminine energy, like the Garden Eve taking the forbidden fruit and growing her consciousness when she's told not to grow her consciousness by the snake. Because the woman is the key to unlocking the consciousness of humankind. The woman is the key. And the reptilians knew that the woman is the key. If she is allowed to eat the forbidden fruit and she is allowed to take in the teachings, then she can be very powerful, and not in a power that's so graceful, in a power that we've never seen. It's not egotistical, it's not controlling, it's not narcissistic, it's benevolent. It's of love. It's of generational wealth. It's of renaissance. It's of higher creativity, both for men and women. So now there's a rise of the matriarchs, the divine feminine, both in man and woman, particularly for the women. The indigenous. The indigenous is returning. And these Hebrew women were also indigenous. They were indigenous, but of a different planet. They were indigenous on their own planet. And they preserved their teachings of love, their teachings of the great spirit of connection to all, of being connected and grounded spiritually, being of love. That's what we think of the great spirit, of being of love, of being of service, of being of true to your soul's journey. So the reptilians now, they strategize how they can deceive us into not growing consciousness. They can deceive us into not growing consciousness. They can deceive us into keeping ourselves unevolved. Because when we're unevolved, then we're going to create more chaos on this planet. And through more chaos, they have more incentive to why they need to be the leaders, the heirs, the soul leaders. And we think of the globalization or the global government, and that has a lot to do with their systematic structure, but it's not of our own. It's interference. It's not coming from us humans. Humans, we have our own mind. It's coming from them. It's coming from the underground, but they're low vibration. We humans have a very different agenda. We have a different evolutionary path because we're on a different sort of evolutionary stance with the universe. We are trying to evolve beyond the fighting, self-preserving, power struggle, power over each other. We are wanting to move beyond that. We've done that for so long. We've done that so many times. We are wanting to get out of that. It doesn't help us. But the reptilians, they're still in evolution where they have not fully learned their lessons on that. Even now, underground, there's fighting, there's rebellion, there's elite groups, there's soldiers, there's just a lot of suffering and pain for the reptilians because they have not learned their lessons. It's like, think of the Middle East. There's so much fighting. There's so much like power struggle and getting power and wanting power and wanting to be the leader and overthrowing the leader, and a lot of control over women and control over men and children. And what does it lead to? Destruction. So the reptilians are like that. And they don't have enough emotional and spiritual evolution through the channel of consciousness to really understand. But there are those who do understand the rebellion for the reptilians, that actually want to liberate the reptilians, transmute a lot of the suffering stuff, and kind of go on the path of the Hebrew, which is morals, ethics, like university. When we think of the Epicurus and Plato and these philosophers, they want to become more philosophically inclined. They want to have more of one with nature, with the elements, in a way that is indigenous, in a way that's tribal and soulful and heartfelt. That's not about just the power of the taking, because you are aggressive, because you want something, you have to take it, and you don't understand about the flow of things. You're trying to do it your way, very stubborn, very, very egotistic. My way, this way, I'm right. And they're at that place, in that density, that low vibration. And in it they have a slave system, like we do. They have a hierarchical system, like we do. Our system is kind of similar to theirs. They have groups. There are those who are privileged. It's like the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games, which is basically, there's like 13 districts, and it goes from very wealthy to basically dirt poor, but majority is basically dirt poor. And just surviving, but in a way that isn't beautiful, that isn't graceful, in a way that is just aggressive and sad. And it has a lot to do with those who have leadership. They don't understand the greater whole. They don't understand about all. They don't understand the demise of themselves through their way of thinking that it's all about just the elite group, or all about just the power, and not really considering about consciousness and considering about the spiritual and emotional, and that's what's going to have them stuck, or they already stuck. But we humans, we've been there, we've done that. We know what it's like to be stuck, and we even feel stuck now because of that. What decisions we made in our ancient past, that we actually want to move out of that majority. We want to focus more so on consciousness than technology, but technology is really imposed upon us. But we will start to focus, as we are already, on consciousness, because that is going to be the key to unlocking the first civilization, a global civilization where all are united, and we'll connect to the Galactic Confederation, Pleiadians, Sirians, Lyrians, and we'll have a diplomacy, we'll have morals, ethics, we'll have laws, the law of the jungle, but it's not going to be a free-for-all. It's going to be of respect and dignity, like an indigenous, respect and dignity. Being a man and woman of your word. Why do you want to do that? What's the whole point of being a man and woman of your word? Is because you cannot emotionally and spiritually climb the tree of life. You may think that you can get away with things, but you can't. Everything comes back. That's cause and effect. That's karma. That's what the Hebrews really taught, a lot about the karma. And if you're going to do decisions that are going to hurt others, you are going to get that back. And it will keep you stuck if you keep doing that pattern. So the Hebrews were like this great wake-up call. The matriarchs were like huge wake-up call. Like, oh yes, I get it now. I need to stop doing this. This is why I'm stuck. This is why there's generational poverty. This is why there's rotten bloodline. This is why there's just so much suffering. Let me advance my mind. And you can't advance your mind unless you really know thyself. And the Hebrews were all about know thyself. You are many lifetimes in the making. Know thyself. And that's where we're at now, to know thyself. We're moving from religious, institutional, sort of monarch control from the European monarchy to spirituality that is all inclusive. Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Muslim, all kinds of different practices are going to be honored and included as the one human, not separate. Not one better, one not better, one right, one not right. We want to move beyond that right and wrong. We want to transcend the duality that has kept us stuck. centuries of the Crusades, centuries of religious wars. And the reptilians know that, because we have a much higher population than the reptilians. We actually have a significant, much larger population. Not 3 times, maybe 10 times, maybe 30 times larger than their population. They want to be leaders. They want to have power, of course. But in order to do that, they would have to dumb us down to a certain low point. They would have to dumb us down so much where we would willingly just let them have power over us, knowing that they're not helping us to spiritually, emotionally grow. And the only way we would be able to basically cut our own foot off is if we were dumb enough to do it. If we were dumb enough to just cut our own foot off and give our foot to this person and be disabled our whole life just so that person can have her foot, and then use our foot for nothing that's very meaningful, nothing that really is of service to humankind. It's service to technology. So through the reptilians, they have this vision of very technology advanced planet, but it's taking. It's not for the giving. The indigenous matriarchs, they have the giving. The earth. They see earth, yes, we have technology in our future 500 years, but we also have consciousness, where we can actually, through our consciousness, we can travel to these other planets. We don't need to use so much energy through rockets or whatnot to get to these planets. We can use our consciousness, which is a lot renewable, and it's a lot less aggressive on the ecosystem. The Atlanteans, they had technology that was very, very superior. They had war technology that was very, very superior. As we know, the Atlanteans, which were the Martians, they have these massive pyramid technology where they could basically, through vibration, they had masterful understanding of vibration, but they also created, they went too far. And, just like Frankenstein, or any mad scientist, or any person who's godlike, or thinking they're God, or getting too high on their horse, or getting too much about, they're obsessed with their technology, or obsessed with themselves, or obsessed with their belief system, that they can create imbalances like Frankenstein, right? Something that's very unnatural. So the Martians, because they did something to the vibrational field of Mars, and now Mars is still needing to rehabilitate. It's actually reorienting itself, because the Martians did something to the vibrational field. They made it somewhat off its grid, and that created a huge catapult into Mars's destruction, like very quickly. And they did that to Earth as well, just like nuclear bombs. They had that kind of power of nuclear bombs. And we know nuclear bombs is exciting when you look at it, but it's very dangerous if you are going to become God and thinking you can do it just for the win, just because you're angry, just because you're not getting what you want, your toy. You want something and you're not getting it, so you're gonna just blow somebody up because you're pouting and you're frustrating because you want something, right? Or you're fighting and you can't get over yourself. Right? Because you think, I'm right and you're wrong. No, I'm right, you're wrong, and you blow people up. Martians had that for some time, that right, wrong, and using vibration technology to basically obliterate the opposition. And we tried that with nuclear bombs, but the Galactic Confederation has now denied us using of nuclear bombs. If we will use nuclear bombs, the Galactic Confederation will intervene, and will even destroy those leaders, or have them basically come out of their leadership, like to end their leadership. And the Galactic Confederation is very strong on this planet because Earth is a very valuable planet to the cosmic regions of time and space, because the Earth is it's like an experiment, but it's a very successful one. And human beings are very successful sort of evolutionary type of creation that has been ordained or created by all these different beings, Lyran beings, Pleiadians, as Syrians. Those are the primary ones. Pleiadian, Lyran, Syrians have been the primary ones, and the Orions came in with the Arcturians to help us create more civilization in the form of energy work, understanding energy work of the planet, mostly understanding energy of the planet, but also came in as great elders. They taught us about the galactic. The Orions and the Arcturians actually taught us about the stories of space. They taught the indigenous elders the stories of different planets, different galactic planets, and even taught about Star Wars, taught about the demise. So they basically taught us a lot about what's going on in deep space and why it goes on. And the indigenous elders would document that through oral tradition and would tell the stories as a way to encourage humanity to make the right choices, so that we can maybe learn from their mistakes, because they were elders. They want us to have an easier transition into our evolution by helping us to learn from their mistakes, learn from their patterns, learn from their choices, so that maybe we could be, become wiser and not go through certain things that maybe we don't need to go through. We'll go through certain things to grow and evolve, but to help us learn our way through, so that we never get too deep into something we can't get ourselves out of, which we have done that. We've gotten ourselves so deep into stuff that we haven't been able to get ourselves out of, and the Galactic Confederation had to come in and basically get us out. But the Hebrew matriarchs and patriarchs as well has helped us, have been great guides, ascended masters. They've taught us a lot about yogic science and technology, the art of Veda, and again, these Hebrews, they were originally, they had, again, the Hebrew language, but it was different. It was kind of a different language. I don't know. The language is also like, it was kind of similar to cuniform back then, but they had more light language, kind of like calligraphy with just light, real pure light. And their sound was more cosmic sound. It was more about sound of creation. It wasn't just like language of talking. It was more sacred sound. And this was all given to us, India, the Middle East, Africa, Europe, Asia, even North, South America. It was different, given in different coding packages, different languages, different methods, expressions, modalities, but it all was kind of about, all about the morality of human beings, the sacredness of human, the respect and dignity of humans, the great sacred prayer of the humans. And so now with the reptilians, a lot of them are coming up, or the elite, and just the elite, but there's so much underground that's happening, like a lot of oppression. We've went through great slavery, and we successfully have, especially in the US and other places, have gone out, but we still have a great slave system, and there's a huge in the reptilian as well that is also being promoted and also heavily being sort of trying to be forced upon us in our future. It's like forcing this system back on us, but we've already been in that system. We already know it pretty well, and we are actually wanting something else that's more emotionally and spiritually going to help us raise our consciousness rather than keep our consciousness very stupefied. But the reptilians need us stupefied because they won't be able to come out and to take control if we are intelligent and if we are very sovereign and very much in our power. So they take weakness on us being out of our power. And that's why when the matriarchs, the Hebrews, came, the reptilians really, they had to leave. They couldn't have power. They had to escape, get out, because the matriarchs brought so much power. Humans rebelled and humans were successful, and the reptilians are not very powerful. They may have power through mind manipulation. They're actually very good at hypnoses, like snake hypnoses, trance, mind washing, brainwashing. They know about the lot of deep methods of psychology, brain manipulation, but they don't have power in the way of spiritual, like power of like Jesus. Like what he represents is like power of love, power of miracle, power of forgiveness, power of compassion, power of being one with God. They don't really have that kind of philosophy or ideologies. They just have power through controlling of emotions and controlling of just people or beings, or they don't really think of power as power of being one with God, or power just you as a person, or love or miracle. They're in a low vibration. They don't understand. There's so much in survival that they kind of don't understand what power of love means. But there are those reptilians who are working with humans that are all about power of love, and they want to evolve. They admire humans, they respect humans, and they believe that humans actually have become the chosen ones for a reason. And it's because human beings they possess a great emotional, spiritual consciousness, very indigenous, very true, very immense, very extraordinary, exceptional talents and gifts. And they want to join with humanity. They want to join with humanity and create the new paradigm. They want to create a new paradigm with them that's about transmuting the power issue, the karmic suffering, and all of that pain in low vibration. And they really want to create a new paradigm for the next 5,000 years, a systematic structural sort of transformation that's going to be based more off of consciousness rather than technology that's overpowering the ecosystem and actually damaging the ecosystem. Because like Mars, they know that method of existing, if for too long, is actually going to damage the ecosystem in a way that Earth could basically be forced to go into a recession, like bankruptcy, where she basically has to reset herself. And in that process, we will all be extinct and we'll come back maybe millions, thousands of years later. So they're like, okay, they want a path of giving to Earth, of collective, of consciousness, of raising the vibration, mastery over pure vibration that isn't used for manipulation, isn't used for control, but is used for helping people to transcend and to transmute and to become more creatively constructive, to become more cohesive, to become more collaborative, cooperative, and become more able to turn friction into more discovery through compassion, like the Hebrew, turning your arguments into understanding compassion rather than I'm right, you're wrong. And that kind of respect is what they really want to have for themselves. Because something about these reptilians, they just don't have respect for themselves as they should, or they have had, because of the low vibrational downfall in which they've gotten really, really into a system that's very oppressive, like in the Middle East, because they originate from the Middle East, as they live underground in the Middle East, in the deserts and North America and South America, but the hub of a lot of them is in the Middle East, and we're seeing a lot of Middle East with the system that's not working. It's the same with the reptilians. They have a system, but it's not working. Okay, in the Middle East, a lot of territories know that the system in the Middle East is not working anymore, that it needs to be transmuted, and it needs to be, the consciousness needs to be up-leveled, and there needs to be more of sharing, inclusion, and there needs to be more of helping people to grow and evolve rather than just keeping the karma spinning through suffering and pain and then stuck, and then, you know, creating basically a power over each other, the weak, all of that stuff. You know, they know their system needs to break. And same as the system that is breaking for us as humankind, that has a lot to do with the reptilian agenda in the way of emotional spiritual control. It's breaking. And because the technology is not helping us. Yes, it's helping us in ways of intellectual advancements, but consciousness is going to help us in ways of emotional and spiritual advancements. And we need both. And we need consciousness to be the prevailing force, not technology. And the reptilians know that, the rebellion group know that as well, and they're working towards helping humans now, like they've helped before, this certain group, to basically raise the vibration of this planet, because that will also raise the vibration of the reptilians, who are very stuck in a mindset that they're entitled to be heirs and to be the global government of the planet, and will do anything to have that power position. But because humanity is wanting very something different, we don't want that kind of Hunger Games. We don't want that authoritative control technology causing us to be very disconnected from the earth and the elements in emotional and spiritual. We are trying to decide consciousness through rebuking and removing, through exposing things that are not helping us to obtain consciousness. And it's like warfare, but it's more in the timeline warfare, because the humans have a timeline that is spiritual emotional evolution, has to do with being one with earth, like the Mu civilization. And then there's timelines of reptilian, where reptilian timeline for earth and human is more enslaving. It's more about taking. It's more about high advancements in technology and low advancements in consciousness, and continuing the system of elites and great systematic oppression as a way to get power, right, for the taking. But that's not going to work, because humans have had they're so fed up. They're so fed up, they're so frustrated with that, because they've seen it and they've done it, and it's been going on for too long. And humans know what it's like to be sovereign and know what it's like to use their power for goodwill. That humans are not going to be tricked and deceived, because the Galactic Confederation is actually in favor of the human, in favor of the human's growth and evolution. And if the Galactic Confederation had to choose, they would choose the human over the reptilian, because the human is a miracle. And it's not one species, reptilian is lesser than human. It's not picking and choosing. It's that humans, they were created in the womb of this earth from Gaia. I mean, reptilians were as well. But the humans, it's like the earth chose them. It's like the earth spoke to the spirit spoke to humans, watching them, and chose them. And it may not seem like that, because there are some humans that are very rotten and destructive and just very dangerous. But human, in Gaia's view, in when we heal from our pain and trauma, we are actually miracle workers. And when we remember that, when we do our healing work, we will become that, the disciples of Jesus. Or, it's not religious. It's just we have powers, gifts, talents that are not for getting power over each other. It's actually for fulfillment, emotional, spiritual fulfillment. And the more we focus on the emotional, spiritual fulfillment, the more we will be able to rebuke timelines that have to do with reptilian interference, with control through deception and media and whatever technology that is trying to put us into a system that is leaving us emotionally, spiritually bankrupt. And we will rebuke that. And we will move into timelines that have to do with not technology basically damaging the earth and taking from the ecosystem without replenishing, or technology that's leaving us mentally, emotionally, spiritually bankrupt and putting us into basically manipulation, distortion, and taking away our sovereignty, taking away our gifts and talents, and putting us into like using us for like technology, using our energy, capitalizing off our energy. We will be able to move into more of an indigenous future in the way of we are one with earth. We are more spiritually, emotionally based society. We have consciousness as our technology. And we have diplomacy, we have metropolitan city areas, and we have more of a structure design that is like renewable. It's efficient. It's about preserving resources. It's about giving to the environment. It's about supporting the environment. It's about having respect for each other. And it's also about inclusion. It's about equality in a way of like the Hebrews, through morals and ethics and through dignity and through chiefs, leaders being selected by the people, chiefs, leaders being ones that actually possess a high dignity, a high morality and ethic, those who have wisdom, those who have wisdoms, and those who are actually can help future generations move into more emotional and spiritual fulfillment so that they can learn and grow, understand nature, universe, understand the self in a way that is actually freeing and helps people to resolve, redeem, and reconcile and reinvent, reshape themselves more in the image of their true nature. So healers being the future of this planet. So this is the story of the reptilians and the humans, going from the remote past, traveling all the way to now, and even moving into the future. And the story is nowhere compared to the vastness of experience that we've had as humans, with reptilians and reptilians, with other galactic beings and the Galactic Federation. But may this story trigger a wonder within you, a wonder of your own imagination, your own science fiction. And may that science fiction be something that actually is maybe something that awakens a greater mystery, a mystery that might be nonfiction,